what we want to do is we're going to work on a couple of techniques that are out of the Fjord manual. Now, when we're working on these, I printed off some pictures. And these pictures actually come from Wichtenauer, which is a wonderful website that will give you a lot of information about multiple masters and really will aid you in your study of Western martial arts. So if you have a chance, go check out Wichtenauer. I will put a link into the description of this class. The pictures I printed off from Wichtenauer are two versions of the same technique from two different manuscripts. We're going to be using the Pisani Dossi and the Getty. The Pisani Dossi is also known as the Navati because it was redrawn and published in 1902 by Professor Navati. But we're going to call it the Pisani Dossi. That's its official name. And the transcriptions or the translations that I'm using are from Wichtenauer as well. For the Pisani Dossi, it was translated by Michael Chidester, and for the Getty manuscript, it was translated by Colin Hatcher. They did a great job on these translations, and I want to thank them for doing the work and also for making it public so that we can use it. As we go through and we look at these, we're going to be looking at more than just the technique. I want to look at what we're seeing in the manuscript, in the illustrations, as well as what we're reading off the words. And my understanding of this comes predominantly from working with Brian Price. No, not Brian Price. From working with Brian Stokes. So this comes from my work with Brian Stokes and from studying with him. In the Pisani Dossi, we are looking at 14B. So this action right here, this is the one that we're going to be working on. The elbow push, and what is said, what Fiore says is, this is a good break of the point on the ground, and in this fashion, you will come to be in the narrow. So my interpretation of that is, this is where I'm going to break your structure, and I'm going to turn you into a very profiled position, therefore weakening you. In the Getty, on this version, on this picture, I have two different translations. One is, as I said, from Colin Hatcher, and the other one is from Tom Leone. This is the picture in the Getty manuscript. Very similar. Let me get that other one out. So in this one, we can see that he's doing the same kind of thing. But one of the things I like about using the Getty over the Navati, over the Pisani Dossi, is that because the Pisani Dossi was redrawn by Professor Navati, it doesn't have the same perspective that we are going to find in the Getty. So if we look at the legs in the Getty, no, in the Pisani Dossi. So if we look at those legs and look at the practitioner's legs, the guy with the garter, this guy right here. If you look at his legs, they're the same size. And when you look at his hand on the other guy's elbow, you can still see a bit of his thumb, but his legs are the same size. If we look at that same picture from the Getty, Get this out of here. When we look at this picture from the Getty, you'll notice that this leg here is bigger than this leg here. This leg is bigger than this leg. And that's a perspective that they used, that the authors used in this, let me change that word, that the artists used in working on this manuscript to show distance. And what I mean by that is, in all of the pictures, the shadows are always in the same place. It's as if there's a window right here, there's an artist right here, and then you have the models here. So the shadows are always hitting them in the same place. And they draw these legs, or they draw everything, so that the whatever's smaller is a further distance from the artist. We can even see it if we get in close on the quill ends. When we look at this guy's quill ends, one is longer than the other. Whereas if we look at that same thing with the Pisani Dossi, we will still see that same kind of position, but it's not as noticeable in the Pisani Dossi version. So we're going to talk about this, and what I want to look at is the placement of the scholar's thumb. First, we're going to look at how he got into this position. Then we're going to look at the placement of his thumb on the other guy's arm. You'll notice when we're looking at this, the scholar, the one with the garter, has his left foot forward. His sword is over the other guy's sword, and he's on his true edge. But if you look at the length of the quill ends, the true edge quill end is significantly longer than the false edge quill end. That tells us that his sword is here, is at this kind of angle, instead of pretty extreme angle, and you can see that because of just how short the false edge quill end is on this guy's sword. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get into that position. So with John here, he says, the master says, you aimed a thrust at me and I beat it to the ground. So this is against a thrust to my chest or my throat. Well, I'm now in front of you, so I'm just going to come down, right. So that's what's coming in, and he's going for that straight on thrust. I need to get out of the way of Fiore in this manuscript, for the most part. When he has his players in sword distance, his right foot is forward. When he's in distance and he's laying hands on his opponent, his left foot is forward. So because we're in this position, we're going to start with our right foot forward. The attack comes in, I'm going to take it on my false edge with the two volta. But then, as I've got in this position, I've got just a real high angle edge on his blade. My toe is still up on the ground. So let's do that again. I'm going to start up there and going with my right foot forward or middle iron. He comes in, I cover that line. So keep going forward. I don't need to push it out anymore. That covers the action and puts it outside of my body. My toe hasn't hit the ground. Now, as I push it to the ground, I don't turn my hands any, but I step in. And I have my hand comes up, thumb on the same side as my finger, so everything's together, and I put it on his arm. Now this brings up a really interesting thing that we were playing with earlier. And let's come closer so they can get a picture of what we're doing. Yeah, he's holding his hands out in front of him. And I put my thumb in his elbow. So my thumb is on top of his elbow and my hands are behind. And I step and I go to push him. Watch the way his shoulder moves. His whole body moves. It twists at the hips, but I don't have any real control of his body. However, if I put my thumb with my fingers and I do that same thing, it's significantly stronger. And the reason that it's so much stronger is that if my thumb's in his elbow and I'm using my grip on him, his shoulder stays down and he's able to maintain his structure. But if I put my thumb with my fingers and I do that, his shoulder lifts up and he goes off balance. And so it gives us the ability to manipulate their body with less force required. Now, I am not seeing anybody on this yet, so I don't know if anybody's viewing. That's us. So I don't know if anybody is actually on here, and I hope you can hear me. Otherwise, I'll do this one again, but I'm hoping that you can hear me on this. So if we take that same action, we'll do it here. As well as our forward. Middle iron door, the attack comes in, I shoot the bolt up, my hand comes off, my fingers and my thumb, as my toe goes down, you just push him out of the way. Watch what happens, again, using that step of putting my thumb around his thumb. Now, I push his arm into his body, and he can still use his sword. He can still step into it. And now it becomes a wrestling match. And the last thing I want to do is make this a fair fight. So I want to push him in such a way that he has no choice but to give me what I want. So do that again. I start in right foot forward, middle iron door. I could be in forward, two. I could have anything. I can even start hook iron door. So that, go ahead, step. There's the blow coming in to hit me in the chest. And I'm going to start in hook iron door with my right foot forward. So I'm in this kind of position. When that attack comes in, I'm going to shoot them both up without even using my sword, and he's still straight to me on the arm. Let's do it this way. Here's the attack goes straight to the arm. So this is the attack comes straight in. As I can, shoot them both up. On my shoulder. He's literally touching my shoulder and able to push me off balance. But that's only because I have not used my sword. That all changed. Measure. And as I step forward, my sword straight up and down. Actually, true edge towards him. And as I step forward, there's a difference. And if you go here, we're going to have like this, or here it is. Pick it up. This position here, this is what we're going to see in the manuscript. The difference is that the manuscript Here, you see his foot like this. I don't need to be that close to make this work. You know, I just it breaks the position of my wrist and makes me weaker. So what I want you to look at is the position of the bodies, not necessarily the distance of the bodies, because that's going to be, they're going to be drawn in the wrong position so that you can see what the body is doing. And if you look at the interview I did with Brian Stokes about perspective in medieval and Renaissance martial arts, he mentions that the bodies are drawn in the wrong position often, so in relation to their opponent, so that you can see what the body is doing. Whereas in Gerard Thibault, the Dutch master, teaches Spanish style. In one of his pictures, he specifically says the figure is drawn out of place and out of position, because if it was drawn in position, you would not be able to see the other guy. In the Fior manuscript, the individuals are drawn in the right position, but out of position in relation to one another, because you need to see what each of them are doing. So let's go back and visit that picture one more time. Hello, everyone. We are 20 minutes into this class, and I just realized what I did. I started filming this on YouTube live and found out that it was on my personal channel, not on the school channel. So I'm going to see about copying that and moving it over to this side so you can get the first 20 minutes of that class. What we're working on today is a couple of techniques from Fiore. These actions are in the grappling in the one-handed sword section. It can be done with a one-handed sword. It can also be done with the hand and a half by taking your left hand off. As a general rule, when Fiore is showing the two people with their swords crossed and they're in sword distance, they're working with their right foot forward. But as soon as, and that can be in here as well, because I'm still in sword distance, so I have my right foot forward. But as soon as I make that, where I'm going to come in out with grapple, my left hand, my left foot is forward, help support my left hand. And the action we're working on today is against a thrust in the Getty manuscript. It is on plate 21 recto, 21R on the Getty manuscript. These are going to be, these can be found on Lichtenauer.com, I believe it is, .com or .org. I'm going to put a link to the website into the description so that you can go and you can take a look at these. Lichtenauer is a wonderful service and a great place to research multiple styles, multiple martial arts, in whether it's Italian, German, Spanish, French. Great website. As a recap of what we were doing, this action is a thrust. I'm starting in open iron door with my right foot forward, and look at where my, as my right foot forward, my sword is in front of my leg, it's not behind my leg. So if I'm going to go like this, it's not here, it's here. So you can see it's giving me that protection. I start in open iron door, my right foot forward, thrust comes in, do it on this side. See how deep that's penetrating? That will go to the middle of my skull. If nothing else, it's going to skull. And If you stab somebody in the face and it goes that deep and it only slows them down, they can rest. So the first thing I want to do is get out of the way. So I'm in the middle of my body. So my footwork is going to start with a two volta. Now at this point, he's hitting me on the shoulder. And that's okay, because I have not incorporated my shoulder. I've taken it out of my body, and he's just hit me on the outside of my shoulder. I don't mind when we test distance and placement to get stabbed in the shoulder, and this is only for testing, and that's because I have not incorporated my weapon yet. If you are getting stabbed in the shoulder like that, and you have incorporated your weapon, you need to reevaluate your footwork. Whenever you run into a problem, whatever that problem might be, first and foremost, check distance. If you fix distance, it will fix almost any problem you might run into in the fight. So I'm starting an open door. So the thrust comes in, I come to the middle iron door with a 2 volta. My foot is still off the ground, and I'm on my false edge on his blade. Both hands on my sword. I don't need to push him out, because then, if I push him away from me, he's just going to roll around and pummel me and do something bad to me. So I don't want to push him away. All I want to do is close the line and move him out of my sword. Then as my toe goes down, my left hand comes off, and I don't move my sword. So I have this position here. And if you look at the manuscript, that's about what you're seeing in the manuscript. As stated previously, when I'm capturing his arm, I am not C-cupping his arm. I'm not putting my thumb around it. Let's come closer and do that again on this page. Go ahead, yeah, over here. If I C-cup and I put my thumb into his elbow and I push him, I push his arms out of the way, but he can still step into me or do something, whatever you want. And so he still has the advantage of mobility. Let's do that again. This is the same thing. Going around, go ahead. You can see how easily he pushes me off balance. If, on the other hand, I do it like the master says, and I keep my thumb with my fingers or just on the top of his arm. Right? I'm here. As I come forward, I'm going to just rest my thumb, so my thumb tip is pushing or resting right above his elbow. Then as I just sit down into it, I move him out of the way. Okay, now let's do that off the thrust. Okay, we'll do it here. It's not the footwork. I want to see. Check measure. Check measure. Be a little close. That's really close. For that. Nice pattern. So this comes in. And there is our action. Again. Check measure. Now, if you look at our sword, you'll notice that my true edge quillen is facing towards him. My false edge quillen is away from him. When we look at the manuscript, we see the same thing. So I'm this guy right here. You'll notice his true edge quillen is longer than his false edge quillen. That's because the false edge quillen is further away from the artist than his true edge quillen. That tells us the angle of his blade. When we look at his leg, you'll notice that the leg with the garter is a slightly smaller diameter than the leg with the shadow. The garter represents which leg moved last, and the size of the leg tells us that it's slightly further away from the artist than the other leg. The other thing we see is on this picture, if you look at his hand, you can see his thumb is on top of the guy's arm. He's not wrapped around it. And when we look at the Pisani Dossi, the same technique in the Pisani Dossi, you can see his thumb right on top of the other guy's arm as well. And that's that little bump shadow thing that's on top of the arm. So he's not wrapping around the arm. What I like to tell everybody in my classes is that if you are working hard at doing this, you're doing it wrong. It should be in such a way that you don't need to work. It just kind of falls into place. In fact, if it feels too easy to be right, probably right. We are 30 minutes into this class, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for another 20 minutes and put these up. And I apologize for not being in a place where you all could join me live, but these will still be there for you. So if we take the same action, we start here. I come through, I cover that, I hold up, just do it again. One like that. Now, done that soul. That's what I was referring to, about you want to keep it that close. Then, as soon as I use my finger, I'm going to do this. Right next to my phone. You can see my whole fingers on this phone. As I get that over, my hand comes off, I turn my sword, and I can cover that up. Look at where he pushes out of play. Now I have the ability to easily come through and do other things, which is going to take us into our next action. And our next action is a throw. So the next one we're doing, and this one I find very, very interesting. Oh, no, my bad. No, we're not doing the throw. We're going to step on his sword. So we are going to be doing this action right here. So we've come in, we've put our hand on his elbow. He moved, and so we're going to step on his sword and push his arm out of the way. Now, there's something really interesting about this picture. In the Getty, Fiore says, "This opponent struck at my head, and I beat his sword to the ground, coming to the position you see depicted here. Now, after forcing you to turn away, I will aggressively wrap my sword around your neck." And this is translated by Colin Hatcher on Wiktenauer. The Pisani Dossi for the same play says, "Either your sword is bent or it is broken, and I can strike you from above or below with mine." This is where we get back into the artwork. When we look at the artwork of the Getty, we see his hand right here. And if you look close at his hand, you can see how much of his fingers, and he has 5, looks like he has 6 fingers if he's put his thumb around the guy's wrist. But that tells us that he does not put his thumb around the wrist. Instead, what he is doing is what I like to call the monkey paw. So you can see, this is a close-up of that same picture. He's got his thumb on the same side as his fingers, but he's not around, he's monkey paw. So if we look at how this position affects our opponent, if I've got his wrist, I've stepped on his sword, and I put my thumb around his wrist, went forward, he can move me around. And if I push him, I can get to that position. I can't go any further because my body's in the wrong place. If I put my thumb on the same side as my fingers, but I put my fingers around his wrist, I can go further, but watch his body. I twist him, but that's about it. If I put my fingertips on his arm, and that gives me that bend, I move his whole body. Let's look at that again. And I want you to try this at home with somebody. Don't take my word for it. I'm not making this stuff up. Try it with somebody at home. See how it affects them. So with my thumb around his wrist, I get there, and that's as much as I get. With my thumb on the same side as my fingers, I can push him further, but I don't upset his structure. If I make a monkey fist, I push him out of the way. It's like magic. Story was amazing. The things these people do. But let's look at why. Not just the how, but the why. And this is my interpretation of why. There may be people with better physiological understanding than me and can break it down better, but this is what I see happen. If I've got my thumb around his wrist, I've now incorporated the muscle and the tendon on the inside of my arm, and I can only reach as far as my arm goes across my body, which is really not very much. If I put my thumb on the same side as my fingers, but I still go around his wrist, so I'm, give me a punch. It's that kind of action, where I'm just resting on it, that we see in other systems. I'm not doing that either, because if I get there and I do that, I can push him further, but I don't break his structure. However, if I put my fingertips on his arm, and I do this monkey fist, and I break I'm not breaking my wrist, I'm actually strengthening my wrist. The reason I'm strengthening it is I lock all those little bones that are in my wrist into place, and when I push him, his shoulder moves. Watch his shoulder right here. So with my thumb around, watch his shoulder. No real movement in that. With my thumb on the same side, there's more rotation, but no up and down. If I put myself in that monkey grip and I do the same push, let me get that far away. There's movement in that arm. And I push it out of the way. And so when we take that to the sword, John gives me because he says he attacked my head. And that can be, he doesn't say how he attacked me. We're actually going to go with the same action of thrust to my face. This is something that will work in and out of armor. At this period in time, the most common type of helmet was called the bassinet. And it could be a clap visor, a hound skull, a pig face. But once they got in tight fighting, they kept the face down for the joust, the initial hit with the lance. But as soon as you got in, you pulled the pins and threw the faceplate down because you needed to be able to have peripheral vision as you were fighting. But this means your face is open. And as we all know, the face, if you're going to put somebody down, face is the best place to go. So if he throws a thrust my face, I'm not going to do it. There's that thrust comes in at my face. I come through, set that down. I come this way to do that other action that we were doing here. But he steps back. I cover it. And monkey step. And one. And your sword will be broken or bent, as the Pisani Dossi says. Or I can go into what the Getty says. I'll show you that one. Okay, good. Now, if that's going to go in my face, that's going to be a good long strike. So, comes in, I'm not going to look over my throat this time. I'm not going to look. This is the attack coming in, but going up just a little bit higher. I won't even be at my throat. That's pretty much the same thing. So he goes his attack. I cover. I step forward. He steps back. I monkey step and push him on the leg. And I can easily get it around his neck. This is where we can start discussing his choices. Let's discuss them. Good? Good. So as we're doing these actions, we have to realize that on our grip, on our swords, our hand is constantly moving around on our pommel. We're never locked into any one position. That is also true on my opponent's body. I'm never only trying to grab him. I'm never only trying to just control him. Sometimes I'm moving my grip around to manipulate how he moves. And if I'm here, you can see if I'm wrapping around his wrist, my wrist is straight. As soon as I multiply, get that other angle to it. And it's that locking my wrist in place that does the job. As soon as I move my feet around, I change the movement. Step back, step on it, look. Now, do whatever I want. Yeah, look at this position here. Again, we go to the manuscript, and we look at the manuscript picture. There's that same action. Now we really wanted to get a look at the hand, so I did a close-up of it. It's not a very good close-up because it's pixelated. But when you look at this, look how long his fingers are. That tells us that he's not just wrapping around his opponent's wrist. He's got his fingers out like this, resting on his arm. And you can count his fingers. He has 5 fingers there. That means his thumb is on the same side as his other fingers. We can do this against a thrust, but we can also do this against a cut. Fiore says in the Getty that, let me get to the right piece. In the Getty, he says, this opponent struck at my head. Doesn't say if it's a thrust or a cut. And I beat his sword to the ground, coming to the position you see depicted here, which is this one. And I am using, again, Colin Hatcher's description. And, Colin Hatcher's translation. So let's look at that as if it was a cut at my head, not a thrust. And this is what we get. I'm going to start in the same place. There's the attack on there. I no longer have a helmet on. Now he's cutting at my head. Look this slow. I'm going to stop while we do it. I see this action happen. I go to the middle iron door with a Tuca Volta. My toe is still up off the ground. I find him in short guard. That takes him outside my body. But he's smart. I'm going for this push. He steps back, so I just keep him down, step on him. It's not good. Then I get this division. Step on sword. So he can let go of his sword and get away. But really, really hard. We're going to put down swords. I want to show you this a little bit more at speed. Are you okay with that? So we're going to lose our swords so that there's no danger for this. After we take that off. So he's going to come in at me and he's going to simulate a cut. So, okay. Good. I'm going to do my first action. Ready? Go ahead. I do that. And look where I end up. Right at his elbow. No, wait, no. Take it. One more time. Good. Good. And I do that. There's the push, and I can do whatever I want. But now, he's gonna, as soon as he realizes he missed, you've got to let his hands come down so that he can understand that he did it. Then he's gonna step back. I'm doing slow to start off with, and then pick up the speed. And that's I'm moving out of the way. Now, on that one, I ended up with my right foot forward. That step down the shoulders. I forgot to take my last step on that. So now I'm going to add that. And that's where we end up. Now I've got that monkey fist. My wrist is bent. I pick up the foot on them. I've got control of this whole body. Last week we've mentioned that if you have a question about a technique and whether or not it's a viable technique, don't do it at full speed in distance with swords. Do it at full speed with swords out of distance. Or as we just did, because we needed to grapple, we did it at speed without swords because we were looking at this action. So I want to thank you very much for joining me. I'm going to combine this class, this half hour, with the previous half hour. So this class is actually broken into two different parts. I want to thank you very much for joining us here at the Davenridge European Martial Arts Backyard. Always a pleasure to see you. I hope you enjoy this class. And until we are able to train in person, take care of yourself. Thanks, everyone.